afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to McRoy's Motors. And in today's video, while I look like a complete idiot staring directly into the sun, I'm going to tell you guys what all needs done on my 1984 Trabant 601S. If you had seen my video about how I managed to get this thing a second time, you'll note that this thing is my child. It is my baby. And as such, despite it needing the work that it needs done, I refuse to sell it a second time. Let's start by going underneath the hood. Like I mentioned before, this is a 600cc, air-cooled, two-stroke twin with 26 horsepower and about 37 pounds-feet of torque. First thing I need to do is replace the battery. This battery's been giving me a complete fit ever since I took delivery of this car the second time. But the more importantly thing here is, I gotta replace some shrouds on it. I definitely got some shrouds from my friend in Germany, but I definitely gotta replace those. Plus I have to remount the little blanket, if you would like to call it that, to help to keep the engine cool. It won't be so bad driving around in like late February, early March, or even a decent day like today. But a hot summer day, let's say late August, the dog days, this thing would overheat so dang quick. Coming back to being underneath the hood here, as you can see, the fuel tank is right here. The car has a gravity-fed system in it, so what you have to do is I have to turn the gas on and off via switch underneath the dash. I have since replaced the fuel hose on it, but it's still leaking gas. So I'm thinking instead of replacing the fuel hose again, I might have to replace or rebuild the fuel valve. It shouldn't be too hard to do, because literally what holds its gas tank in place is literally 2 bolts. There is some electrical work that also needs done on this Trabant. For instance, if I turn on the hazards real quick, which is this little button right here, you'll see that the rear hazards work perfectly fine, but the front ones, not so much. The left works perfectly fine, but the right simply doesn't. I think it has maybe a short somewhere, maybe it's not making a contact, I don't know, but I took apart the entire lens and the bulb looks brand new, so I'm guessing there's a lack of current somewhere. The horn on this car also doesn't work. It worked when I drove it up in New York back in June of 2023, but when I took delivery on it, it never worked since. I'm guessing it just needs a fuse. The turn signals on this car do not auto-cancel, but that is exactly how it was when it left the factory. But the problem I face here is the turn signal socket itself is rather loose. What happened is this bolt right here, I put it back in, but I tightened it, and I turned on the turn signals to make a left turn, and it went through the plastic and it fell out again. So, thankfully I have a spare turn signal stock, and hopefully the screws will be a little bit more kind to me next time I get it replaced. Cosmetically wise, this car is not perfect. But then again, it is a Trabant, you come to expect it that way. But this thing has a little bit more cosmetic issues than I thought I would see. For instance, this part of the driver's door, I'm not sure if you can see it on camera here, but it's a slightly darker shade of yellow as opposed to the rest of the car. And the reason why that is because the previous owner who had it before me was backing this car into his garage. When the wind was so strong, it literally took the door out of his hand and caused it to smack right against the frame of his garage door, causing it to crack. So he did his best to repair it and make it look as decent as possible. It's got a little bit more paint imperfections along the jack points, and if you look carefully here, it's got a little bit of a scratch here on the fender. As for the seats themselves, well, at least the front seats, they're slightly torn. And if you look at the gutter rail here, you'll note that the screws aren't exactly flush. They're supposed to be flush, flathead screws, and they're kind of like bubble top Phillips head screws. Despite all its cosmetic flaws, however, I'd rather keep the car exactly how you see it, because even though this car is not perfect by any means necessary, this car is a big symbol of history. And as such, what other car can you think of besides a Yugo that has not only been made in a country that no longer exists, but was shipped from that former country to Hungary, and then from Hungary to Miami, Florida, where I drove it home from Florida all the way back up to Ohio, and yes, it took me around 2 weeks to get home, and then it went from Ohio to Michigan, and then from Michigan to New York. This car's been pretty much everywhere. 2 styles of government, 2 countries, and 3 states. This car's seen it all. That is the reason why, even though it's registered here in Ohio, I still keep the original New York inspection stickers. Now, despite replacing the engine on this car, I also had to tighten up its shift lever, because what would happen is if I would go from down to first here, when I would shift up to second or go from third up to fourth, it used to go all the way past the fuel efficiency gauge, which wasn't correct. Thankfully, it was pretty easy to do. All I had to do is get underneath the hood, loosen a bolt, and then just adjust the shift lever and then tighten it back up again. It was really that simple. What also is a problem that this particular Trabant has, as you cannot plainly see, but on the other side of this steel wheel here, is not 100% round. I do have a spare wheel in the trunk, albeit one that is over 30 years old, but the wheel, the steel part, is perfectly round, so I gotta swap the wheels out from both tires. The Trabant already is a very rare sight here in North America. If I were to guess how many are in the entirety of the United States and Canada, I would guess about 350. But what makes this one even rarer is the fact that it's a 1.5 door model, by which I mean the driver's door only opens from the inside. For some reason, this latch decided to break. But the passenger door, though, works perfectly fine. The passenger side window is a little bit harder to wind up than the driver's side. I think just the gear on that needs replaced. So that is pretty much all the work that my Trabant currently needs. It might need more later on down the road, I'm not sure, but being a Trabant, it's very likely. So if you want to see more of this car, as well as many others, feel free to subscribe to McElroy's Motors, and I'll have more videos coming along soon.